Today we'll talk about the Old Testament reading for LCMS calendar for Resurrection Day. I know we are a few weeks behind, but that's how we have it. For Resurrection Day, we have Isaiah 65. Starts with verse 17 and goes through 25. So basically to the end of the chapter. And we will have a little bit different introduction for today, because usually we talk about the book. And if we have passage from Isaiah, I say a couple words about Isaiah, or if we have Jeremiah, it's Jeremiah, and so on and so forth. But today we mostly will talk about the theme, and then we'll touch on the passage itself. The importance of the theme of creation or heaven and earth is hardly can be overestimated, okay, or just give too much attention to that. It's impossible to give too much attention. Why? Because in Genesis 1:1, when story of the Bible begins, we have, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Okay, and we know that the earth was void and it was empty, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the deeps of the water, and so on and so forth. What do we have in the very end of the Bible? In the very end of the Bible, in Revelation 21:1, and the passage goes to the end of 22, we have passage where John, the writer of Revelation, says, I saw new heaven and new earth. They kind of newly created or renewed heaven and renewed earth. So what we have is basically two poles, if you will, or two pillars. Let's have pillars, two beautiful columns or pillars that have kind of like an arch of the whole biblical story or biblical narrative. Okay, so it is in between. Definitely theme of creation of heaven and earth, or just heaven and earth, pops up from time to time in different places. For example, if we'll go to Genesis 24, where Abraham sends his servant to pick up a wife for Isaac, the whole passage starts with 24, 1, 2, and 3, I believe. Now Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he had, put your hand under my thigh, and I make you swear by the Lord, the God of heavens and the God of the earth, that you will not take wife, and so on and so forth. So the thing is, he asks him to swear by the God who is creator of heavens and of the earth. Okay? So as I said, it comes from time to time in different stories. In one of the Psalms, the whole Psalm is 104, can be divided into passages or blocks that can be outlined according to the theme of 7 days of creation. And why it is important that in Isaiah 65, in our passage, the passage starts with, For behold, I create new heavens and the new earth. For the former things shall not be remembered or come into mind. But be glad and rejoice forever, in that which I create. Okay, so there is a creation of heaven and earth, and it is important for the whole passage and for the whole Bible. Two thoughts about that. One of them is, I think it's a humbling thought that the whole scripture is basically dedicated to idea of creation, not creation of man in particular, but the creation of heavens and earth. And why it is humbling thought is, I believe we need to be less anthropocentric. Means anthropos in Greek means man, so we need to stop to be centered more on humans and then take into account the whole creation, with an important role for humans to play, as we have our Psalm 8, that God created humans just a little bit lower than angels. And then by New Covenant, we have many passages, some of them include the words of Paul, where it says that we will judge angels. Don't you know that? So we are kind of like second in command after God, in the sense we are, humans are, who are mature in Christ, are taking the place of CEOs of creation incorporated, let's put it this way. But you need to have this, I don't want to say factory or plant, but you need to have that whole system going, then you can be in charge. So that's one thing. So there is a sense of humility that men are not the only purpose of God. The whole purpose of God is to have a creation going and develop from one stage to another stage. From creation, which was everything created good, as we know it from Genesis 1 and 2. Everything was tov me'od, everything was very good. Through Isaiah to Revelation 21, where new heaven and new earth descend, or actually appear, and then New Jerusalem descends. And actually this kind of replace what we have in Isaiah 65. Let's go further. In 17 and 18 we've read just about creation of new heavens and earth. In the second part of verse 18, for behold, same beginning. For behold, I create new heavens and new earth. For behold, I create Jerusalem to be a joy, and her people to be a gladness. I will rejoice in Jerusalem, and be glad in my people. No more shall be heard in it the sound of weeping and the cry of distress. Okay, so that's another very interesting observation. From now on, creation and Jerusalem is kind of linked together, cannot really be separated from each other. The thing is, this passage from Isaiah 65 picks up on many themes that have started in the very beginning of Isaiah. For example, technically, we should have done our study in Isaiah 1, because Isaiah 1 starts with the following words. The vision, or actually the burden of Isaiah, son of Amos, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, kings of Judah. Now, listen very carefully. Second verse. Hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth. Okay, again, heavens and earth, they go together from the very beginning of the book. For the Lord has spoken, children have I reared and brought up, but they have rebelled against me. Okay, so God has children, God has his own nation with the capital in Jerusalem. We'll come to that in a second. But they rebelled. But there is heavens and earth who are, I would say, prophet and God, on prophet on one hand and God on the other hand, uses them as witnesses on this trial. So the trial between God and his people, and there are at least two witnesses, heavens and the earth. So the thing is, later on in the second part of chapter 1, verses from 21 to 31, we have a story of unfaithful city. And even though the city is not really named, but it's kind of obvious what kind of city is in the prophet's mind. We know what city he is talking about, what sins he mentions. And it's mostly religious sins, or sins that from religion lead to social injustice. As a temple, as a center of the city, holy city, and then the city that leads to development from temple to city to the whole community. So it's very interesting that in 65 we have creation of heaven and earth, and then creation of New Jerusalem. And then if you read Isaiah carefully in chapter 5, so we have chapter 1, chapter 2, the mountain of the Lord and the day of the Lord. And in chapter 3 we have judgment against Judah and Jerusalem. And in chapter 5 we have a story of vineyard. That God planted vineyard, and what happened? He was looking for good grapes, but unfortunately the only grapes he was able to find were sour. Okay, so it's not the grapes you expect. You know, if you cultivated the vineyard, you want to have a good, decent grapes so you can prepare a good, very tasty wine. Okay, no way. They couldn't do that. But in our passage in 65, by the end of the book, look at that. Verse 21. They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruits. Okay? So they shall not build and another inhabit, and they shall not plant and another will eat. So it's their vineyard, and they will do it, and God will bless their work. There is one more thing. By the end of our passage, we have a very interesting verse, the verse 25, that basically we will concentrate today mostly on verse 25. We are not going to go through the whole passage. I would say it's too much. But the passage where wolf and the lamb shall graze together, and the lion shall eat straw like an ox, and so on and so forth. That's almost verbatim, even though kind of shortened, even more concise, repetition or replica of another passage that we have in chapter 18. In chapter 18, in the first block, and if you remember, in one of our previous Isaiah discussions, and you will have a link down below in the description box that you can check it out, when we talked about the blocks, how the whole book of Isaiah can be outlined. So by the end of the first block, in chapter 11, because the first block goes from chapters 1 to 12, so in chapter 11, verses 5 and 6, 7, 8, and 9 talks about, for example, verse 6, the wolf shall dwell with the lamb. A little bit different verbing, but almost the same. And then we have here, the lion shall eat straw like an ox. We have this verse. It is verse, give me a second, it's the very end of the verse 7, and the lion shall eat straw like an ox. Okay? And thus shall be the serpent's food. It's not, we don't have this particular passage, but we have a passage about the nursing child shall play over the hole of a cobra, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the adder's den. And then they shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. They shall not hurt, verse 9, or destroy in all my holy mountain. So it's out of this 6, 7, 8, 9, out of 4 verses, we have one verse formed, or you can even say maybe, I don't know, reformed or formed different way to make it more concise and be more particular, more precise in a sense, to give us kind of like a springboard that on one hand brings us back to the beginning of the book. On the other hand, it still reinforces this kind of prophecy, and we need to start to look for fulfillment of this prophecy. Now, as I said, we are not going to talk about the whole passage, even though it's a fascinating passage. But we do not have enough time to do that. What I want to share with you is very interesting things that I was able to find out when I was preparing this class for this very last verse. So, one more time. Isaiah 65:25. We'll stay there. The wolf and the lamb shall graze together. So I'll write them down, all those titles or names. Wolf and the lamb shall graze together. Then we have the lion shall eat straw like the ox. Like the ox. And then we have one more character, and thus shall be the serpent's food. So we have a serpent. There are two main readings, or scratch it, as one of my dear colleagues would say. There is a main reading for this passage is, I would say, eschatological environmental. Okay? So eschatology is a study of the last things or last times sometimes. It's, that term is used for last times. So what happens at the last times when God will come to judge the world, or what will happen after Judgment Day, what kind of world we will end up with. So when you read commentaries on Isaiah 11, as I said, because those two passages are very connected. I mean, you cannot just skip these connections. So on, however you interpret Isaiah 11, and that's somehow should correlate with how you interpret Isaiah 65:25. So in Isaiah 11 and in Isaiah 65, the main idea, most of the commentators, they try to explain that's how the world will look like when basically the whole world will be renewed, everything will be under complete God's control, and it will be in such a new type of creation, or in some sense it would be such a reverse back to Garden of Eden style creation, because we do not really hear anything about wolves or lions eat flesh, so they were not as bloodthirsty as those animals now. So it is either, or they will be either so developed or so going back in a sense of in creation that the animals that actually would be I want to say in the food chain conflict right now, they actually will be together. So the whole eschatological idea is so environmental. So it's more about nature, how nature will be transformed. Okay, with, for example, there is an interesting poem on falling asleep by Fireside, I think. Firelight, sorry. By William Meredith. Sorry. William Meredith. Okay, so if you want to Google that, he actually picks up on that. So animals are sitting together, and their hoofs and their paws, so kind of like, you know, the ox and some lion, for example, they sit, they get together and they enjoy the fireplace, and sometimes only in sleep those who used to be predators kind of remember their moves, but they don't do it while they are awake. It's very interesting take on that story. Yet what I would like to do today is suggest that this reading can mean something different, very seriously different. The thing is, out of these five animals, we have two very important stories in the Bible itself that kind of give us a glimpse of how it could be fulfilled, pretty literally. First of all, let me show this connection. If we think that the lion usually is king of animals. Okay, and that's what we have for the animal which is designated for Judah in Genesis 49. That the Judah is like a lion, and he goes, and his scepter will never be departed from him, and he will be the king, basically. Okay, that's very interesting. But here we have a lion, so kind of like a king who eats a straw like an ox. When we hear these words, something should click, or, does it ring a bell? It should ring a bell if we know the story from Daniel, one of the few stories that were written by a Gentile. So from Daniel chapter 4, where Nebuchadnezzar, who is the king, and actually there is a long tradition to associate Babylonian Empire with the symbol of lion. Actually, it's a winged lion, but still, it's a lion. But in Daniel chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar himself, it's kind of like a life journal stuff, or probably in the modern days, it's, I don't know, maybe even Snapchat or Instagram stuff, that he kind of took a picture of himself while he was in the mental distress, and for X number of periods of time, he was like a wild beast creature, but he was not a bloodthirsty beast and creature. He was eating like an ox. So in some sense, if we give ourselves a liberty to reinterpret the meaning of lion, we can see how it was fulfilled in Daniel chapter 4. There is another connection. Not in the precise order, but if we will pick up these two guys together, lamb, lion, and the lamb. Okay, we have lots of songs about that. But out of the order of these animals that are mentioned, if we group them together, if we pay attention to lion and the lamb, definitely it should ring the bell when we go to Revelation. And if we go to Revelation chapter 4, what do we find there? In chapter 4 and 5, mostly in chapter 5, so it's Revelation chapter 5. In chapter 5, what do we have? Then I saw in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne a scroll, written within and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. So, the scroll of Scripture. Both surfaces, I would say, were used for writing something. They had 7 seals, and people will argue even more what that means, and somebody would correlate it with a symbol of inheritance or last will, we would say, with the 7 seals, across that. If you would go, just take your time sometime and have an excursion into closest synagogue that you have. When they will bring the scroll of Torah out of the Ark of the Covenant, will bring it out, pay attention how many features should be removed for the scroll would be able, so that scroll would be opened. It's actually 7. It's very interesting. But going back, so for our text, and I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?" And no one in heaven or in earth, again, this couple, in heaven or in earth, or under the earth, was able to open the scroll and to look into it. And actually, there is an addition here, under the earth. By no means I mean editorial edition. The thing is, we still have place under the earth here, because no under earth creation will find only after Revelation 21. So since we are in chapter 5, everything is so far so good. So, and no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll and to look into it. And I began to weep loudly, because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. And one of the elders said to me, Weep no more. Behold, the lion from the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has conquered, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. And between the throne and 4 living creatures, and among the elders, I saw. He doesn't see lion. He is hearing about the lion, but who is he seeing? And I saw lamb standing. So he hears one thing, he sees another thing. In one combined symbol, we have lion and the lamb brought together. It's very interesting. I would say even fascinating, as one of the good characters of Star Trek would say. Fascinating. Okay, now going back to Isaiah 65. There is one more interpretation. Apart from this, at least for me, it is pretty obvious fulfillment of that. Okay? But there is one more reading. It doesn't mean that it's either or. It's just this is one of the things that we need to pay attention to. And definitely, serpent who eats the dust. Don't we remember that? The dust shall be your food from Genesis 3. Okay? That's kind of like just one more reminder of what was before Genesis 3. But apart from that, even though I just wrote Genesis 3, let's erase it. I hope we will erase it. Someday we probably will. But what is very interesting is 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 out of 5, and we know how to figure out the other one. 4 animals are mentioned in one passage in the Bible. I already mentioned that. I kind of like gave you a clue. If you think about Genesis 49. Genesis 49 is very important. I mean, all of the passages in the Bible are important, okay? There is no part of the Word of God which is not important. But for an understanding of overall picture or overall structure, Genesis 49 is very, very, very important. In this chapter, we have a story where Jacob, being quite advanced in years, he blesses his sons, his 12 sons. Interesting thing, if we read it carefully, he compares some of them with animals. For example, let's start with our list this way, even though if we would read it, we would find it a little bit different way. Okay? Wolf. In Genesis 49, in verse 27, it is Benjamin. Okay? Literally. I mean, seriously. Let's go there. If we go there, we'll find it. That is what it is. Okay? 27. We have it right here. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning devouring the prey, and in the evening dividing the spoil. Okay? Right there. Okay? One more thing. As I already mentioned, as I said, I gave you some purposeful spoiler alert. In verse 9, we find out that lion is associated with the tribe of, everybody knows that, tribe of Judah. Okay? And actually, even Revelation 5 builds up upon that. You know, when John hears that this is the lion, you know, from the Lion of Judah, from the root of David, and so on and so forth. So, verse 9. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up, and he stopped down. He crushed as a lion. as a lioness, who dares to rouse him, and so on and so forth. So he is really close to lion. Then there is an interesting thing. Let's skip ox for a second. We'll come back to that. I will outline all of them. Trust me, it will be fun. But for right now, if we'll jump into verse 17, we find out that Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a viper by the path. Okay, so if we'll go to 17, for some reason, I don't know why, but Jacob, when he sees his son, he blesses, and still blessing, I don't know. Then Jacob called his son and said, gather yourself together, I might tell you what shall happen in your days to come. And then we kind of supposed to take it as a blessing, okay? Though Bible does not really uses the word blessing for all of these things, so he names Dan as a serpent. Okay? Okay? Now, there is Simeon and Levi, our brothers, weapons of violence, verse 5. And by the second part of verse 6, for in their anger they killed man, and in their willfulness they hamstrung oxen. So, I believe, this is 6b, it is connected with Simeon. And the reason is, we need to connect lamb with Levites as those who perform sacrifices. That's my take on that. So, as I said, this is just another reading. The reason why I do it this way, there is one more backup for that. If we read very carefully in Numbers 1 and 2, how the tribes of tribes of Israel, there was only one tribe of Judah, how the tribes of Israel were positioned around tabernacle, we find out that these four guys, with one kind of sneaky exception, they would be leaders on a particular zone. Okay, as you know, we have tabernacle in the middle, okay, with Holy of Holies in the west, and then we have 3 tribes here, 3 tribes here, 3 tribes here, 3 tribes here. Okay? The cool thing is that the prominent, or one of the most dominant tribe on the west would be Benjamin. Okay? The one of the dominant tribe on the east would be Judah. Okay? They would have more man, or actually equal as soldiers, than anybody else on this side. Okay? On the south, we'll have Simeon, and on the north, as a leader of, in a sense, community, it would be Dan. Therefore, we need to think of another layer between tabernacle and 12 tribes of Judah is Levitical tribe, who would have priests here and 3 groups of Levites, 3 family of Levites, who would escort tabernacle and be kind of mediators from between regular Israelites and presence of God himself. Okay? That's very interesting and fascinating. So I believe, in my humble opinion, seriously, in my humble opinion, I believe that we need to take into consideration not mostly eschatological and ecological reading of Isaiah 11 and Isaiah 65, but still eschatological, but sociological. So what happened is, tribe of Benjamin provided first king, and we know this king as a guy who was named, his name was Saul, and then Judah provided another king. And what happened is, as you know the story, and especially if you don't really know the story, you might want to remind yourself by reading 1 Samuel chapters, let's say starting with 16 through the end of the book, you'll see this, or at least through 26. Okay, so from 16 to 26, there is a rivalry, or at least David did not want to grasp the throne, but Saul was really after him. I mean, he chased him all over the country. The poor guy had to run away. Not really poor guy. I mean, he had 400 people with him, gathered slowly but surely, kind of like a Robin Hood character, but still no fun whatsoever. I mean, he couldn't be in one place. He had to hide all the time. So the thing is, these guys with Simeon, pretty aggressive tribe by all means, and Dan, who is kind of like a serpent, not really wading into that story, but still in that presence, and Levites in between, they, in eschatological future, will be able to live together very peacefully. I would use the word peacefully. And why Bible doesn't use the names of other tribes? I don't think there is a need for that. By naming the leader tribe in every of 4 sides, it kind of incorporates all of the tribes together. And I know it is a symbolic reading. There is no 12,000 people from every tribe. But if we go again into book of Revelation, and as you see, book of Isaiah, at least by the end, and many of these prophecies kind of connected with book of Revelation. If we go into book of Revelation in chapter 7, that's what we find. I heard the number of sealed, 144,000 sealed from every tribe of sons of Israel. Again, the numbers are symbolic, but we have a name of all 12 tribes. Okay? So these guys were able to find their way to bring peace into their own community, and this peace into their community is shared with peace with a multitude that nobody could that nobody could number, from every nation, from all the tribes, from peoples and the languages. Okay? And all of these guys, again, around the throne, we have now Israelites, an unnumbered multitude, all together worshiping one God, the creator of heavens and earth. And I believe that is an important model for us, for especially those of us who live in the United States of America, since we are people with different background, and we need to learn how to correlate with each other in peace to end up at the throne of God. One God who created heavens and earth. Stay blessed.